Hi, everyone. Welcome to Making the Cut and Launch Your Line, Selling. I can honestly say I think this is the most important of the series that we have here on Launch Your Line. Selling, selling, selling. You got to love what you're doing to sell it well. So let's get started. Customers are finding brands has changed over the years. However, the discovery process has changed, but the desire for discovering new and fresh and innovative brands is instinctual. So it'll always be there. You as a brand, how are you going to be discovered? So the static formula before the internet was around was you create a line, you find a sales rep, and they get you into retail stores. And then they book the orders, and then you have 3 to 4 months to make, and then you ship. And it's the same cycle anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 times a year. Then when e-commerce came out, so it still was the same thing. There was certain brands that didn't want to be in XYZ retailer for many reasons, whether it was not on brand, whether it was they were selling to a retailer too close within the vicinity. You got to be careful on those things. Then when the internet came about, or brands became more vertical, as they say, brands started either having their own stores, for example, Lululemon. So they designed, they made, and they sold their own product. Aritzia, these are both Vancouver Canadian brands. Aritzia also started private labeling. So what that means is they curated their own lines. So they had designers in-house, they had merchandisers in-house, they had several different labels, but they were all made by Aritzia. So, and that was the beginnings of Aritzia back 30 years ago. So vertical. And then smaller brands, it's not that easy to have your own brick and mortar. It's a lot of money. So for smaller brands, they would go into retail, independent retail stores, but they started doing their own e-commerce. That was their brick and mortar. And then they, slowly discovered that you need to spend money so that people can find you. So the other thing is brands would go to, or still go to, trade shows. Also very expensive, and you really need to have some money to be doing this. If you don't have a salesperson or meetings with retailers lined up, there is no guarantee that you are going to make sales. So you have to be prepared for that. I had a client who did lingerie who started out doing lingerie trade shows, and she was prepared and had the financial means to start out slow. I think she only wrote one order her first trade show, and she was prepared for that. She did the lingerie shows. And a lot of times buyers, this is another reason that buyers may not buy from you in your first or second show, is that they want to know that you are going to be there. You're still going to be around. This isn't kind of like a hobby. Let's see if I can sell something. Because when a retailer purchases a new brand, they're also investing in you. They've got to build you up. They've got to promote you to their customer. Oh, this is a really great brand, so they want to make sure you're there, that you're in it for a while. Your second trade show, she wrote some more orders. By the third trade show, she actually picked up some of the key boutiques in New York, which were amazing. And then by the fourth show, she was on the cover of Women's Wear Daily, which is like the holy Bible for fashion. She got into a lot of press. She did really well. She had the means financially to play the long game that way. If you don't, I don't know if a trade show is really where you want to be. There's a lot of noise happening there. And there's a lot of people. It's 3 days. It's very intense. There's better ways at it. But again, if you're targeted more lingerie or more outerwear, there are key shows that it might work out. But again, you should go to these shows before you make that decision, just to walk them before you invest money in them. I think one of the best ways to start getting your name out there, to start building an email list, is by doing trunk shows. Well, they used to call it trunk shows in the 80s and 90s. I guess it sort of changed to pop-ups. But you can still do trunk shows, kind of the same thing. You partner with a retail store, and they notify their entire email list. You notify your entire email list, and there's a trunk show for 1 night or 2 nights selling your inventory at this store. Now, it can be multiple good things can happen by doing this, because you will sell product, you will gain emails for your email list to market to, and the retailer that you've partnered with, if you've done the research right, and that retailer's customers are where your customer is or are your customers, then they will see that their customer has responded to your line, and they might put in a small order. So you have your first retailer. Rochelle Barons of the shirt, like I mentioned to you, she organized 5 of these trunk shows. I called them pop-ups in the other episode, but basically they were trunk shows, whether they were 1 night or 2 nights. And that's where she sold all of her stuff. The difference with a pop-up is that it's there longer. So your pop-up might be there for 2 days or 5 days. And pop-up kind of started with retail stores. So a buyer or a curator or merchandiser or whatever would rent a place for 2 weeks that was sitting empty and fill it up with stuff. And that would be a pop-up. So like a pop-up retail. You might be a pop-up brand that pops up in a retail store, or you might do a trunk show. Either way, you're collaborating with a retailer to expose your brand to their customers and your customers. But you've done the research. You think that your product would fly in their store. So it's a win-win for them too. They also, you can work out a percentage. They might get 10% of your sales or 20% of your sales because they are exposing your brand and opening doors for you. So it's worth it. You're not paying any rent. You're not paying anything. And you're selling your product at retail. Okay. So how do you go about knowing what stores to do this in? Research. And this is where knowing who you want to hang next to is very important. So there's something called a competitor, which we all know what that is. And there's something that's called a comparable. Who you want to hang next to is a comparable. So I own a design school. I know who my competitors are, and I also know who is a comparable to me. So they're not necessarily my competition, but a comparable is who I would consider myself in the same category with. And that's the same thing in any product you're making. So if you go into any retail store, for example, and you see independent boutique and where they carry several brands, you can see different brands that are hanging side by side. That's what I mean by who do you want to hang next to. So see yourself. Again, it goes back to the first episode where I was saying you need to know your DNA, you need to know who you are, you need to know who your customer is. And a part of that is knowing who some comparables are. It also helps you with your retail price too. Okay, so trunk shows and pop-ups. There is the plus is you're selling at full retail. You're building out your email list. You are getting feedback in real time on your line and your product, which is incredibly valuable. Lululemon, when they first opened and they only had 1 or 2 stores, Chip would have somebody from the design team or everybody that worked in the main office that was in design and product did 4 hours a month or a week, I can't remember, on the retail floor, working retail. So they could see what the customer was saying about the product, from fit to design to comfort. So when you have that kind of instant feedback, your product is going to be stellar. Next iteration, next iteration, next iteration. So I think it's very important on many levels. Also, when you're doing these trunk shows, it's a really good way to find retail stores for you to go show your brand to. Because you do want to position yourself in some retail stores, whether that be 6, whether that be 12, it's up to you. But as much as you're making a less of a margin because you're going to be selling your stuff at wholesale into these retail stores, it positions you as a brand and it gets people knowing your brand. You can choose 6 stores in the city you live in, then maybe the city next door to you, next door to you, next door to you. And that's how you build out your retail base and how more eyeballs get to your website and your e-commerce. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And it takes research. Now, you're going to start getting busy when you're doing this. So that's a good thing. If you see that your strong suit is more in the designing and the creative direction, in the product development, you're not so strong in the selling, you need to hire somebody that sells. That is the first thing you invest in. Sales, 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 sales. You can handle fulfillment. You can handle the product dev. You've done this. Sales. Get more sales. You'll get a product developer or someone that can help you with logistics, or a project manager. But you want to be pushing sales. If most of your stuff you want to do e-commerce and you've already established you're in a few retail stores, you've got some eyeballs to your site, you're doing some e-commerce business, then what you want to have with you is a really great digital marketer. So they do the SEO, they do the non-sexy stuff. This isn't about ads. This is about SEO, organic search. It's about people finding you and also managing your Google AdWords. But that is key. When you do start getting busier, I will say there's some people that are just like, they're the best salespeople, so they should stay front facing. Like I've got my cousin actually owns a food distribution and dry goods distribution, and he's amazing. He's like the best salesperson I've ever met. And when he sort of started doing more of the business side of it, the sales fell because that's where he excelled. Even though he had hired a sales guy, there wasn't the right person to manage the sales guy or the right product. So you have to know what you're really good at and where your strength is. Focus in and, hire where you're a little bit weaker at. And that's a good problem to have. So we had a student, her name's Shirley. She's doing really well. She ended up going to Parsons. But while she was at Parsons, she started selling on Depop. So there are a lot of different platforms where she knew where her customer was. And she went from like nobody knowing who she was to getting on underground rappers and then to getting on covers of magazines. She came to me after a year or two of doing her business, and she was doing, I think, 5,000 to 8,000 in sales a month and making all the stuff herself. She is still doing phenomenal. She graduated Parsons. She was at Helmut Lang for a while, and her customer loves her stuff. So she knows where her customer is, and it's super cool. Like I wish I could wear it. So now she's gotten into accessories. Isn't that wild? That's really cool. Leather belt, leather cuff. That's really, really sweet. She's a very talented designer. Her stuff ended up in Paper Magazine. Like, check this out. It's incredible. And this is all because she put her product out there in the right spot. So a lot of people would think, I'm going to go put my stuff on Amazon and sell gazillions. Maybe not. This stuff wouldn't sell on Amazon. Your customer wouldn't find you if you put it on Amazon. She had done the research. She knew where her customer was, and she utilized Depop like phenomenal. Obviously, she's in a few stores. She's in Sense Global E-commerce. She's in APOC store in UK, and she's in Lucky Jewel in New York. It's amazing. So she's got herself into a few brick and mortars, and she's selling online, and she's doing excellent. And she's got a full-time job. She's young. But again, it goes back to selling and putting yourself out there. So the key thing is start with what you can afford, get it in front of your customer, and take that feedback. So instead of blowing $100,000 on a bunch of inventory, but not knowing if your customer is going to respond to it the way you think, spend $10,000. Spend $10,000 and do a couple of trunk shows, see if your customer buys, see the feedback they have for you, and go reiterate. But there's no way around it. You have to have an e-commerce site. People need to be able to find you. Doing all this work and not having somewhere people can go to contact you is a waste of money. So have your e-commerce set up before you launch or when you launch. Do the research. Find some key retail stores to partner with and do trunk shows and pop-ups. And then ideally get your brand in there selling regularly. And then drive traffic to your site. It can all work, but it is hard work. There's no easy way. I mean, I'm a sucker too. I scroll on Instagram and there's all these people know how to make $1 million in a month on Amazon, know how to do this. I meet a lot of people. I've not met anybody that's made $1 million on Amazon out of the gate. So I'm still looking for that person though. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, if you subscribe and follow us, you get these PDFs. And if you're one of our students, even for our part-time classes, you can email me any questions you have and I will help you. All of our classes are done in person and also live online. So you can take it from wherever you are. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed Launch Your Line. Many people have found success. You will too. All right, have fun.